This program will help guide you through the nomination and application process for California Preservation Foundation's Preservation Design Awards. This is the second version of this program. The first version was done 4 years ago. There have been a few changes to the program that will be included in today's webinar. So this is really your opportunity to ask questions about the process and the application. Next slide. So joining us today are, John introduced himself, John Haeber, our Field Services Director, Christine Madrid-French, our Development and Marketing Director. We're also joined today by Bill Schaeffer and Andrew Wolfram, the co-chairs of the Preservation Design Awards. And as John mentioned, my name is Cindy Heitzman. I'm the Executive Director at the California Preservation Foundation, broadcasting today from Napa, California. Next slide. So we're going to review the 3 major components of a nomination. And I'd just like to start by saying that the nomination is done entirely online. So we've moved away from printed and written applications and nominations now to a total online process. So we're going to review the 3 components, which consist of the entry form, which is completed online and requires additional information, including the affiliates list, a release form for all photographs, and signatures of the project principals. Second part is the narrative. So this is a 10-part question and answer format. There's word limits on the answers. This information is collected, and then we format it and distribute it to the jury. And the last portion are the slides, which is a 12-slide PowerPoint slide set that you're required to submit along with your application. Next slide. So the entry form, the online application actually has 5 steps, and that's the screenshot that you have there of the online version. These 5 steps are described on our website at californiapreservation.org/awards. And we're going to just go through some of the high points here of the entry form. Next slide. So this is a list of the 5 steps in the application process, which are described on the website. And we'll describe some of the important features of the application in the next series of slides here. So they include the entry form and affiliate spreadsheet. Now, the affiliate spreadsheet can be filled out online or submitted in an Excel spreadsheet. Actually, I think that we changed that, and it's now all done online. The second is the complete, there's a signed application release, and that is required to be signed by the project principals. There's also a narrative and questionnaire, which we described, which was a set of 10 questions, and then all the required materials, all the uploads, the photos, and the slides are submitted. And then the last step, of course, is a payment. Next slide.
Yes, this is Andrew Wolfram. I am a co-chair with Bill Schaeffer of our awards jury, and I'm a principal at TEF Architects in San Francisco, and we've done quite a few of these submittals, and we've won some, and then when we don't, we always wonder what happened. And we're here a little bit to tell you about what happens in the process and what the jury is looking for. And one of the things that you start with is the award category that your project fits into. There are 8 award categories. They mostly align with the Department of the Interior's definitions of various categories of preservation work. And we look to you to choose the category that is most appropriate to your project, because you know your project. You should read the definitions that we've provided and find the one that really best fits your project. If we find in the jury that you've made a choice that doesn't quite fit, don't worry. We have the ability in the jury to kind of move things around if we find people who have maybe not completely understood these definitions. But these definitions do give the jury a sense of what your project is. And for example, if you choose reconstruction, which is depicting through new construction a no longer extant historic site, we're going to think that your building is all new building, and we're going to start treating it that way, and that's going to give the overall impression. So it is important that these categories that they align with your project as you go forward. Next slide. I think it's back to Cindy.
It is, thank you. So I'm going to walk you through some of the information that's required on the entry form. This is important information as we need to know primarily who is responsible for the work, the lead on the project, the owner or client, and then who is the lead designer, the engineer or the architect for the forms or for the project. So this form requires information about all three of those. So it requires basic information about the project. The category that Andrew just described is listed on this form, along with the project name. If it's the historic church in whatever town, whatever the project name is, whatever you name it, this is where it goes. We need the address and the city for the project. Then we need basic contact information for the entrant or the applicant, their role in the project, basic, as I said, basic project information. We require information on who the owner is, and then the principal architect. And likewise, we need all contact information for these three: the project lead, owner, and the principal architect. And each is required to sign a signature form and upload it as part of the nomination. Next slide. So there's some important points about the application. Number one is the deadline is June 22nd at 5 p.m. Due to the current pandemic and a number of other conditions, we have extended it. Type of buildings that qualify are buildings that are obviously historic, but it doesn't have to be a building. It can be a structure, a bridge, a fence, a road. There's any number of types of historic projects that can be nominated. And if a building is listed on a national, state, or local register, that would be indicated on the application, although it's not limited to that. So you can have a building that is historic, but is not on a local or state or national register, and it still can qualify for listing. Next slide. Bill?
Okay, so hi, I'm Bill Schaeffer, and as Andrew mentioned, I'm a co-chair of the PDA and a board trustee, and I'm a partner at Solo and Madrid Construction in Napa, so broadcasting here from Napa. So important points about the narrative. I think it's important to talk a little bit about the process. So the submittals are distributed to the jury a few days in advance, and everybody's given an opportunity to review it. And then we get together in a meeting format for a day and review and discuss the submittals together. So it's really important to remember that to the jury, that your project may not be geographically near them. They may not be familiar with your project at all, the challenges, the participants. If somebody on the jury did participate in your project, they'll recuse themselves from the jury during the discussion for your project. So it's just really important that in your presentation, in your submittal, that you're providing a lot of context from the perspective that someone likely has never seen your project. Next slide.
So we are going to be asking you a series of questions that will help formulate your response so that it's as clear as possible to the jury. And this again is Andrew Wolfram, broadcasting from Berkeley, California. So there's a narrative in which we're going to go through step by step in these slides, the types of questions that we're asking. And this is so that we can really formulate a complete picture of your project and help you in case you might miss something that's important for us, and we consider these design awards. Next slide. So the first thing is a really brief summary of your project. If you were to boil down the essence of your project to just 40 words, what would it be? This is something that we typically read when you win an award. This is what's announced at the design awards ceremony. So you want this to really convey the sort of essence of your project, what it means, and what you want the jury to know about it. Next slide. Then you have a little bit more opportunity to be a little bit more descriptive, to tell us about what you did, how you did it, what were the important features that were preserved, what was altered, what might have been added. This is a project narrative where you can really tell your project story in this 150 words. So you're really trying to give a more complete impression of your total project. Next. Then we have a series of questions that just give us some background as to the site itself, whether it's on the National Register, on a local register, or part of a historic survey. Next slide. And we would like you to describe the building's historic significance, i.e. what makes it significant so that it's on one of these registers. This isn't asking you what you did to the project to make it significant. It's really asking why is it being submitted for a California Preservation Foundation Design Award as opposed to, for example, an AIA award. We're looking for projects that are starting with a historic building or site. Next slide. Bill, I think this is you.
That is me. Yeah, so the narrative, describe why the project deserves an award. So it's important to describe the challenges that make your project outstanding. It's what was the context? What types of challenges were there? Community opposition, financial or financing challenges. So it's really important to sort of create some context of why it's outstanding, and to show that. Next slide. The condition immediately prior to the work of the project. So what's so interesting about a number of these preservation projects is that you'll see the submittal, and oftentimes in the finished product, it may not be apparent that anything was done that was done so well. So it's really important to provide some context for the condition immediately leading up to the projects, and that condition could be going back years, and it might not just be the condition of the building, but really sort of the context, either geographically, socially, or in the community that created challenges for the project. So important to create context. So where were the feature structures involved in the project? So again, really important to concisely explain really what the scope of the work was. If it was an exterior renovation, facade renovation, to specifically highlight those features and explain those. So just so the jury has an idea of exactly what the scope of the work was and what they're looking at. So explain the basis of decision to include applying of the Secretary of Interior standards. So all of the projects will be reviewed according to the Secretary of Interior standards, but generally speaking, for teams, there's usually one or two standards that they're applying to the project. So it's just important to sort of state those to give the jury some context to what they're looking at.
So this, the contextual importance is typically most important if we're looking at a contextual infill project, one that might be a new addition within a historic district, addition to an existing building that's part of a rehabilitation project. So this is just trying to give us some better understanding of how what you did fits with the surrounding environment. Next. And then we have a series of questions that are optional, but we certainly encourage submitters to explain their approach to sustainability. It's very important, and we believe there's a big alignment between preservation and sustainability. And especially if you did things that are innovative, we want to know about them. And this is a great opportunity for you to explain it in this slide here. This just gives us some better context in terms of when the building was originally built and its period of significance. That period of significance is important of understanding how the rehabilitation work or preservation work or restoration was conducted. And it depends a little bit also on the category that you've chosen to submit your project in. Next slide. And then finally, I find that when we're doing a cultural resource report, sometimes these questions are a little bit challenging to answer as you're going through them. So feel free, as if you're submitting a cultural resource report, to kind of modify your responses relative to the kind of work that you're doing within that report. So we still want to know about the significance of the site and those other things, but you may not be doing any of the rehabilitation work, but you need to explain why this report is really worthy of an award. We do get a lot of reports. A lot of them are very good, but we look at them and say, well, this is a good report, and this is sort of what you would expect for this type of a report. So what takes it above and beyond? Is there something about the layout that is especially convincing or especially easy to use by the community? Is this a report that actually had a widespread was widely adopted by the community and was really important for community engagement? So I think especially for cultural resource reports, it's really important to explain what differentiates yours from what is considered sort of a standard cultural resource report. Next slide. And then finally, you have the opportunity to submit additional information if you have letters of support, if there are news articles that have spoken about your projects or videos, other material, letters from the community. This is a great opportunity to just provide more information to the jury. Next. Cindy, I think it's you.
It is me. So I'm going to talk about what the jury sees and hears during their meeting. So the jury receives a formatted version of all the project information that is submitted. So everything you fill out in the form is taken and is formatted so it's consistent for every project. But to ensure impartiality, we ask that the nomination be redacted. So you would remove any reference to firms and individuals responsible for the project, and do that before you submit it. This is very important. And during the jury meeting, we display all 12 slides that were submitted with the nomination, and we read the 40-word description to the jury for every project. Now, they have received this information ahead of time, so they will have reviewed it. So this is just to kind of summarize and remind them of what they reviewed. More often than not, when we review these projects, we will have to go back through the slides to review some of the points that were made in the narrative when the jury deliberates about each project. It's important that the slides are presented in a manner that chronicles the project development and exemplifies the points that are covered in the written narrative. That is the 10-question form. So we're going to quickly show you what the jury sees and hears when you submit your project. So we're going to give you two examples. First is a rehabilitation project, and the second is a report. This will give you an idea of just how fast the jury reviews this information and why the slide set is so very important. Ready, John? Located in West Oakland, California, Lampwork Lofts is the rehabilitation and conversion of a 4-story warehouse into a 92-unit live, work, and residential project. The 116,000 square foot design subdivided the interior space to take advantage of the existing industrial character. The project was completed in 2014. The next one is a report. So this is a historic context statement for the Los Angeles Unified School District. Exploring a century of evolving ideas about ideal school design in California and beyond, the Los Angeles Unified School District Historic Context Statement provides a consistent framework for historic resource surveys throughout the Los Angeles Unified School District, the nation's second largest public school system. So as you can see, we move pretty quickly through these slides, but rest assured that all this information is given to the jury well in advance, so they have a chance to review it, and they come into the jury meeting prepared and ask questions. So at that point, or at this point, we're going to turn this over to you if you have any questions.
Cindy, and while people are thinking of questions, we forgot one critical part of this webinar, which is to go through the steps of the form one by one. And we did this last time, and I think, personally, I think it is very helpful because some of these steps can be very confusing. And so what I'll do, well, continue to think of your questions, and we all want to see them, and please type those into the chat box. But while we're waiting for those questions, I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm looking at the first page of the awards application. To get there, of course, you would go to californiapreservation.org/awards, and then you'll notice right below there is a set of 4 different tabs. The categories that Andrew reviewed are available by clicking on the award categories tab. So if you want to get more clarification on what those categories are, you can click on that. The instructions, the very detailed instructions, are available by clicking on the instructions tab, and you'll notice these are much more detailed than we could go over today, but it helps with each of the steps to go through this and look at more information regarding each step. And then finally, when you're ready to submit your application, you'll find, first of all, you'll find all steps here. You could click on the links individually, but what we recommend is starting with step 1 and moving through them sequentially. So you would click on entry form here, click on apply now, and that'll take you to the first step of the awards application. When you get to the first step, you'll notice I've pre-filled this information out on the page. So as Cindy mentioned, we'll need, first of all, the entrant's first and last name, their firm, their email address. And this question is often something that people ask us about. Are you the principal contact for this entry? The question here is really asking, are you the person who's going to be processing every step of the application and ensuring that payment gets made for the application? So it's whoever is the submitter, because whenever you, or whoever is this email, will receive all the communications relating to the application itself, and you want to be sure that you're receiving all of those as you proceed through the application. So if you're not that person, or if this person here is not that person, this field here allows us to get more information on who that is. Next is the project name. You put in the discipline or area of involvement on the project that you were involved in. You have a project address and the entry categories that we went over. You can, this year, in years past, we allowed more than one entry category. I think this year we're having you only select one category. For each of these 3 primary contacts that Cindy went over, there are first and last names, suffixes, titles, firm name, and email address. The only required fields are first, last name, and email address, but we really do recommend that you fill in as many as you could here. When you complete this step, or below that, below those 3 principal contacts are the affiliates that Cindy went over. These could include people like the project lead and the owner that you've listed above, but also the author, the historic architect, the lead engineer, consulting engineer. As many people as you can think of and can muster up, please add them below on this form. We still, as of now, we still have the template if you feel that you prefer to use an Excel spreadsheet for this, but this field also allows you to enter that information. When you click on continue, you're going to be taken to the second step. This may take a second because what it's doing is it's emailing each of the principal contacts you've put above and giving them a link to sign. Taking longer than it typically does. Oh, it's loading now. Okay, so you'll get presented with a message that says, congratulations, you've completed step 1 of the application entry. Below that, you'll notice that all the information you put in earlier is already pre-filled in. Here are some additional fields for each of those 3 contacts. And Cindy mentioned we need, before an application is complete, we need signatures from all 3 of those people. So they can either sign with their mouse if they wish, or they could type in their name right there. And as you collect these signatures, you can continue to the following step, which is the application release form. Within this form is a release from the photographers for any photos you provide or creative works. The project name is there, and then you could sign your, or the photographer or the creative owner, the copyright holder needs to sign acknowledgement and then put in their contact information here and let us know whether or not they'd like to receive credit and what that credit should be in. So, and then if you prefer to have the copyright holder sign on the Word document, we're still providing you with that option. You would simply download that. Whether you have the copyright holder fill out this step above, or you have them download the Word document, you can wait for them to complete that and then can continue to step 3, which is the narrative. And within the narrative are all those questions that we've gone over already. And then when you submit the narrative, your final step is uploading the materials. So here's a list of all the things you need: the completed signature page, the signed release form, the affiliate spreadsheet, or the affiliates listed, if you put them in on the form, the PowerPoint presentation of 12 images that we just did a demonstration of, minimum of 6 high-resolution images of the project, and additional optional supplements. All of these you would simply drag and drop or click to upload, and you want to wait until the confirmation appears and shows that it's been fully uploaded.
Jonathan?
The bottom of this form, yeah.
Oh, sorry if I can interject there. I failed to really put an emphasis on that, and you just mentioned it. The quality of the photographs that people provide and the information is really quite important to really give the jury an idea of what was involved in the project. So I just want to reiterate the importance of the quality of your photography in the presentation.
Hey, John, you still there? I can't continue without you. I guess I could ask a question to the panelists while John is offline. I had a question from someone when filling out the form. Are you still there, John? Oh, okay, I was going to ask a question while we had a pause there. Do you want to keep going ahead, or do you want me to ask it? Okay. Okay, I'll start asking questions. John, we're still having some trouble listening or hearing you on the audio. But Andrew, Bill, and Cindy, if you'd like to start your videos, I have a couple questions that any one of you could answer, whoever feels like they have this. Here's one. Do you have any suggestions for the letter of recommendations, content, and who should provide that, the client or community member or other? Thanks.
I'll answer. The letters of recommendation would usually come from someone outside the team that's nominating the project. So it could be a mayor, someone notable, so anyone from the community, but they're usually outside the nominating team. We've had newspaper articles, editorials, things submitted along with letters. If you're submitting a letter, again, redact it. As we give the information that's provided to the jury is anonymizes all of that information.
Great, thanks, Cindy. We have a question about the jury. How big is the jury and who serves on it? And are the jurors' names revealed at any point?
You want to take that, Andrew?
Well, typically our jury varies about 7 to 9 people. We look for a broad range of expertise in the jury. So we have preservationists, historians, contractors, architects, landscape architects. So we're looking for a broad range of people within the preservation profession. The jurors are part of the award ceremony, so you certainly will know who they are. We don't typically announce it, I believe, before the jury event, but they will be announced subsequently.
Hey, there's John. So it's pretty much a blind submission and jury process,
Yeah.
right? So everything that way, you can judge each nomination on its own merits, right?
Right.
Right.
Okay. Here's another question. When filling out the form and entering the client's email, did you say they will automatically receive an email to sign the application, even if the person hasn't reached out to the client yet? Okay, great. I have another one. We have good questions today. Is there a limit on how many projects can win in each category? And then I'd like to add, do you award each category every year?
You want me to take this one?
Yeah. Why not?
We do not necessarily award each category every year. Sometimes we don't get entrants in each category, or sometimes the entrants we don't feel are award winning in a specific category. The number of awards that we give out depends a little bit on how many we get. It is a very competitive process. So it's typically a total awards between 20-25 is the number of total awards that are given out. Typically the rehabilitation category has the most awards because that's where most of the entrants are. But we don't necessarily have a fixed limit in advance. It really does depend on what we get in terms of the number of nominations.
How many awards did we give out last year? Do you recall, John and Cindy?
It was about 25,
Yeah.
right?
24, 25, I think.
I think it was a little bit less. The year before
Yeah.
was big, was about 25. I think last year was around 20.
Yeah.
Again, it varies. I would say on average around, let's say 45, 50. This year's a little bit different. In the past, we used to allow people to nominate multiple categories. And so that always bumped the numbers up because there were duplicates, but they were looked at individually with respect to the categories. We've done away with that. You pick the category, the applicant picks the category, the jury decides if it's right. And so now it's, we'll see how many it brings in this year, but I'd say 40 to 45 unique applications.
Oh, go ahead, John. What do you got?
Yes, it can be. But we always require the owner and the lead designer to sign off on it. And that's precisely why. It's because it could be someone from outside that team or within that team, but we need to know that we have permission to proceed with this application by the owner and the lead designer.
Right, and we also want to know that you're all talking to each other. So if it's a really big team, we don't really want to have one entrant from one member of the team and then another from another member of the team sort of competing with each other. So we want to know that your teams are all sort of discussing amongst themselves as they're submitting an application.
I'll take this. They're two separate things. So the slides are meant for the jury's information, to inform the jury about the project. It's meant to accompany the written narrative and kind of give some context to the whole nomination. The 6 photos are meant for, are provided for our use, CPF's use. So if you're a winning project, we want those high resolution photos in hand so that we can start putting them out on the website, putting out information, put them in the program. We do not augment what you give us. So once you give us the slides, that's it. We don't touch them. They're two separate things. And it's easier to get that information up front than it is to try to retrieve that information later in the process.
Yeah, but typically the photos that you're given would be ones that you're also including in the slide presentation. Yeah. They aren't separate. They're not totally separate. They're part of your presentation material. It's just we're using them in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say the letters of recommendation are not required. So you don't have to submit a letter of recommendation. It's supplemental information. It's just that we have a lot of projects that have come in that have a lot of community support. And I'll tell you where it does make a difference is on some of the smaller projects, some of the community projects, where we show that a building or a project has really helped transform a community or a portion of Main Street. That's something that is significant. That's where it makes a difference. But it is, as I said, it is supplemental information, and the jury is instructed to first look at the nomination, the answer to those 10 questions and the slides. The supplemental information is in a folder for them to review, and we alert them that there is additional information, but it's not required. As far as who the letters can come from, again, depends on the project and depends where it is. Most, I would say, the recommendations or letters come from government. A lot of mayors, council members, city staff. It seems to be where we get a lot of the letters from, although not required. But yeah, that's it.
I can take that one.
Oh.
So the photos should show the story of your project in whichever way, for somebody who doesn't know it, shows it best. So we would recommend that you have photos of the building or site before your project started. During the construction is also helpful, especially if you did something, if you were applying for one of the awards related to craftsmanship and technology. We want to see how the work is done. That's fantastic. And definitely definitely we want to see the work when it was completed. That's super important. Yeah, I don't think you can tell the story of your project if you don't show completed photos. So that's for the slideshow. Please tell the story, use the photographs to supplement your story. For the PowerPoint slides, for the slides that are given as part of the 6 high-res images, for that, probably the photos of the project completed are the ones that I would most recommend. You might want to have a historic photo or something that helps tell that story, but that is kind of a more shorter.
I have a question. I wanted to ask Bill and Andrew and all of you actually, what would you point out as some of the projects that you found most inspirational through the Preservation Design Awards in the past? Just to give people an idea of some of the previous winners.
I mean, for me, the projects that have been most impressive, I mean, frankly, are the ones that have been almost the most heroic, I guess, and what they've gone after. And that may not necessarily be a construction challenge. It may have been the one that comes to mind for me was last year. There was a infill project that was just outstanding as an example of, I think, what we would aspire to for a infill project in a neighborhood. That it was just really an excellent example. That really stood out to me. And I think it's also important that it's not necessarily a project. We had a couple of studies that were done last year that were incredibly meaningful as well. That sort of spoke to, I think, to some of the underrepresented community in some of our areas. So I think for me, those are the things that are important.
Yeah, for me, I think there have been some projects that have been in smaller communities where the community, they've been the structures that are just super important to that community. And you know, it's a community that has very limited resources, very limited access to funding, and they've just done outstanding work. So it's ones where the community really comes together and they do a lot with very little, and it really shows kind of love and effort.
I would add that, you know, that those projects that Andrew and Bill described are truly notable, and the jury takes that into consideration. So if it's a community effort that you know, might not stand up to some of the bigger, grander projects that we see, but it's something that is truly important in a community, that can make a difference to the jury. So it's important to point those things out. And I would also mention that the jury has the discretion to look at these projects and to select one or two or none to recommend to the board for the Trustees Award for Excellence. And these are projects that meet that are just outstanding. They set an example for others to follow. And the case that Bill mentioned, the A.V. Wahlberg House or project, was one of those projects that received a Trustees Award for Excellence. And it was not only because they did an outstanding job in executing the project, but because it was addressing a very significant issue that we're dealing with, and that is affordable housing. So these are the things that we, you know, that can sway the jury or that are notable. And, you know, it isn't so much a case of comparing one project against the other. Each one stands on its own. And that's why, you know, it is important in, you know, although we don't, letters of recommendation are not required, but that speaks to many times the importance of a project in a community. Yes.
Submit many, we encourage that.
Yeah.
I don't think so. You already said the recording is going to include the examples, right? The 12 slide examples. No, I think everything should be on the website. And if people have questions, we posted the email in the chat, but if you have further questions, you can email one of us at our regular addresses, or the address would be pda@californiapreservation.org, Preservation Design Award, PDA. And you can go ahead and ask us any questions. And then the deadline is 5 p.m. on June 22nd for your nominations. And it does take a while to finish all the information that you need to insert. So you might want to get started right away. Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.
you.
Thank you.